The conference room at Morrison & Associates smelled like old leather and expensive coffee, the kind of place where fortunes changed hands with a signature. I watched through my laptop screen as Henry Morrison, my mom's employer's attorney, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. The Whitmore family sat around that mahogany table in Greenwich like they owned the world, which technically they did. "Thank you all for gathering today," Henry began, his voice carrying that formal tone lawyers use when they're about to drop a bomb. "Robert Whitmore's last will and testament is quite straightforward. I shouldn't have even been on this Zoom call. I was just Marcus Chen, 28-year-old junior architect at a Hartford firm trying to finish a strip mall design before my 2 p.m. deadline. But Henry had insisted I dial in. Robert specifically requested your presence, he'd said 3 days ago, which made 0 sense. Through my screen, I could see Victoria Whitmore, Robert's daughter, the actual heiress, sitting rigid in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table. Behind her, barely visible in the doorway leading to the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of my mom, Elena, still wearing her housekeeper's uniform. Her face looked pale, even through the pixelated connection. "The estate, valued at approximately $250 million, Henry continued, and I almost choked on my coffee, including all properties, assets, and holdings of Whitmore Properties, is to be transferred in its entirety to—" The pause felt like forever. Marcus Chen. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Victoria's face drained of a color so fast I thought she might pass out. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Through my screen, I watched my mom's hand fly to her mouth, and I swear I saw her sway on her feet. "I'm sorry. What?" I finally managed to say, my voice cracking like I was 15 again. 2 weeks earlier, I'd never forget that afternoon. I was sketching elevation plans when my mom called, her voice shaking in that way that meant something was terribly wrong. "Marcus, mijo, Mr. Whitmore he's very sick." I'd driven down to Yale New Haven Hospital that same evening. The oncology wing had that particular smell, antiseptic trying to mask something nobody wanted to think about. Robert Whitmore, the man who'd employed my mom for 30 years, lay in that hospital bed looking nothing like the imposing figure I remembered from those few times I'd seen him at a distance. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer," the doctor had said quietly, checking monitors that beeped with mechanical indifference. 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps less. Robert's hand trembled as he signed papers that day, his lawyer hovering nearby. I'd only been there because my mom asked me to drive her, to be support. I stood by the door, uncomfortable and out of place. "Henry," Robert had said, his voice raspy but determined, "make sure everything goes to the boy." To Marcus. "Sir, are you certain?" Henry had glanced at me, then back to Robert. "Victoria is your biological daughter. This will cause—" "I've been certain for years," Robert interrupted, then coughed into his fist. "I neglected that young man for 28 years. Let this be. Let this be my way of making things right." I hadn't understood then. I still didn't understand now. Back in the present, in that conference room transmitted through my laptop screen, Victoria finally found her voice. "This is insane." She stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the hardwood. "That boy barely knows my father. He's just the housekeeper's son." "Mrs. Whitmore," Henry said carefully, "your father was of sound mind when he executed this will. I can assure you," but Victoria wasn't listening. She grabbed her phone, already dialing. "Theodore Blackwood? I need you. Now. My father's estate. Someone manipulated him. I want investigators. I couldn't hear the rest because she stormed out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Through my screen, I saw my mom standing frozen in that doorway, tears streaming down her face. Not happy tears. Scared tears. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. Unknown numbers. News outlets, probably. In Greenwich, a story like this didn't stay quiet for long. "Mr. Chen," Henry's voice pulled me back, "I understand this is overwhelming. We'll need to meet to discuss the details. Perhaps next week at your earliest convenience?" I nodded, numb. "Yeah, sure. I don't understand why. Henry's expression softened just slightly. Your mother might be able to help you with that question. But when I looked back at the screen, my mom was gone. What I didn't know, what nobody in that room knew except my mom, was that this inheritance wasn't generosity. It wasn't even about guilt. It was about blood, secrets, and a truth that had been buried in a shoebox for 28 years. A truth that, once revealed, would either save us all or destroy everything. 3 days after the will reading, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Not with congratulations, with warnings. The first text came from my buddy Jake at the Hartford Architecture Association. "Dude, you're trending on Connecticut Twitter. Not in a good way." Attached was a screenshot with the headline, "Greenwich Heiress Contests, 250 Murders, Will Claims Manipulation." I was sitting in my studio apartment in Hartford's Asylum Hill neighborhood, surrounded by half-finished blueprints and cold pizza, trying to process how my life had imploded. The strip mall design I'd been working on felt absurdly trivial now. Who cared about retail space when you were suddenly at the center of a fortune war? My mom hadn't returned my calls in 2 days. That wasn't like her. Meanwhile, 40 minutes south in Greenwich, Victoria Whitmore was building an army. I wouldn't learn the details until much later, but that Tuesday morning, she walked into the law offices of Blackwood and Partners on Greenwich Avenue, the kind of place with original Picassos in the waiting room. Theodore Blackwood was Connecticut's most aggressive estate attorney, famous for destroying inheritance claims with surgical precision. "I want everything," Victoria had said, sliding a check for $50,000 across his desk. "Phone records, financial history, proof that this boy manipulated my father." Theodore had smiled. "Mrs. Whitmore, I have just the person." That person was Jack Delacroix, ex-FBI, now a private investigator specializing in fraud cases. His rate was $500 an hour, and Victoria didn't blink. "Undue influence cases require proving 3 things," Theodore explained, his voice carrying that calculated coldness expensive lawyers perfect. "Opportunity, motive, and evidence of manipulation. If we can show that Marcus or his mother exploited your father's vulnerable state, then I get what's rightfully mine," Victoria finished. I finally reached my mom on Wednesday evening. She answered on the 7th ring, her voice thin and strained. "Mijo, I can't talk long." "Mom, what's going on?" I kept my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. "Why would Mr. Whitmore leave me everything? Did something happen between you two?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Marcus, listen to me carefully." Her accent always got thicker when she was stressed. "Mr. Whitmore was a good man, a generous man. He felt responsible for us. That's all." "Responsible? Mom, that's $250 million. People don't just feel responsible for that kind of money. Sometimes they do." Her voice cracked. "Sometimes guilt makes people do things that don't make sense to others." "Guilt about what?" "I have to go. I'll call you later." "They? Who's they?" She hung up. What I didn't know was that at that exact moment, Jack Delacroix was parked outside our old apartment building in Bridgeport, photographing the entrance. He'd already interviewed 3 of our former neighbors, asking pointed questions about my mom's relationship with Robert Whitmore. Mrs. Henderson from 3B had said, "Elena was always proper, but Mr. Whitmore did visit sometimes, brought gifts for the boy. Seemed odd for an employer." Delacroix wrote that down. That same afternoon I did what any confused 28-year-old would do. I started Googling, not gossip articles but real documents, public records, financial disclosures. That's when I found it. Buried in Yale University's scholarship database was my full financial aid package from 2015. I'd always assumed I got a merit scholarship. My high school grades had been solid, my portfolio decent. But there, in small print under donor information, was a line I'd never noticed before. "Anonymous Educational Trust, administered by Whitmore Properties, LLC, $200,000, paid in full," before I'd even submitted my application. My coffee went cold as I stared at the screen. Mr. Whitmore had paid for Yale? Not just helped, paid for everything? I clicked through more records. My high school in Bridgeport, private tuition, anonymously covered. Summer architecture camp in Boston when I was 16, full scholarship from anonymous donor. He'd been funding my entire life, and I'd never known. But why? Back in Greenwich, Victoria was having her own revelation. Delacroix had delivered his preliminary findings to Theodore's office. "There's a photo," Delacroix said, sliding an image across the conference table. "Whitmore Properties holiday party, December 1997, before Marcus was born." The photo showed a younger Robert Whitmore and my mom, standing closer than an employer and housekeeper typically would, his hand on her shoulder, her smile genuine and warm. "They had an affair," Victoria said, her voice sharp with vindication. "Marcus is his illegitimate son. That's why the inheritance." Theodore studied the photo. "Possible, but we need more than proximity in a photograph. We need proof of paternity or documented admission." "Then find it," Victoria snapped. What none of them realized, what made the truth so much more devastating, was that they were half right. There was a secret. There was blood connection. But it wasn't the story they thought they were uncovering. And every day they dug deeper looking for one truth. They got closer to finding another, one that would shatter everything they believed about family, loyalty, and the price of silence. Some secrets have expiration dates. Others calcify into the foundation of your entire life. My mom's secret was the second kind. Greenwich, Connecticut, December 1997. Elena Reyes was 22 years old, saving every dollar from her housekeeping job at the Whitmore estate, dreaming of bringing her younger sister up from Mexico. The Whitmores were hosting their annual holiday party. 200 guests, champagne towers, a string quartet playing in the conservatory. She wasn't supposed to be working that late, but Mrs. Whitmore had asked her to stay, help with cleanup. Extra $100. Elena said yes. Robert Whitmore, 46 then, found her on the back terrace around midnight. The party was winding down, and he was drunk, not sloppy but loose in a way Elena had never seen. His tie was undone, his eyes red. "My wife is pregnant," he'd said, staring out at the frost-covered lawn. She announced it tonight, in front of everyone. Elena hadn't known what to say. She just stood there, holding a tray of empty glasses. "I don't know if I'm a good father," Robert continued like he'd forgotten she was staff. "I don't know if I'm a good man." That vulnerability, that crack in the armor of the powerful man who signed her paychecks, changed something. They talked for an hour, about family, about fear, about the weight of expectations, and when the cold drove them inside, when they found themselves alone in the guest house, Elena would replay that night 10,000 times over the next 28 years. Not with shame, exactly, but with the terrible knowledge that one moment of human weakness had created a lifetime of impossible choices. March 1998. The pregnancy test showed positive in the bathroom of a CVS in Stamford. Elena stared at those 2 pink lines and felt her entire future collapse. Robert wouldn't remember that night. She knew he wouldn't. He'd been too drunk, and in the months since he'd treated her with the same polite distance as always. His wife, Catherine, was 7 months pregnant with Victoria. The Whitmore family was perfect, ascending, untouchable. Elena made her decision in that CVS bathroom. She would disappear, move to California maybe, or back to Mexico. Anywhere Robert wouldn't accidentally discover what she'd done. But then Robert found her packing. "Elena, what's happening? Where are you going?" She'd lied, said family emergency, said she needed to leave immediately. And Robert, kind in that careless way wealthy people sometimes are, had stopped her. "Please, don't go. You're part of this household. I'll double your salary, whatever you need." Part of her wanted to scream the truth, but Catherine was about to give birth. Victoria would be born into a scandal. And Elena would be the homewrecker, the manipulative housekeeper, deported and destroyed. So she stayed, for the money that would give her baby a chance, for the silence that would protect everyone. December 1998, Bridgeport Hospital. Marcus came into the world at 3:47 a.m., 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Elena held him and made a promise. He would never know shame, never know he was anyone's secret. Robert visited the hospital the next day. brought flowers, a gift basket, a check for $1,000. "You're family to us, Elena," he'd said, looking down at the baby. For one terrible second, his expression had changed. He'd stared at Marcus's eyes, those distinctive Whitmore eyes, steel gray and intense, and Elena's heart stopped. He looks," Robert started. Elena held her breath. Robert shook his head. "Sorry. Tired. He's beautiful, Elena. Congratulations." The moment passed, but Elena knew. Something in Robert had recognized something in Marcus. Blood calling to blood in a language neither of them spoke. Summer 2003. Bridgeport Medical Lab. Marcus was sick with pneumonia, and the doctors needed family medical history. Did the father have any genetic conditions? Allergies? Predispositions? Elena didn't know. Couldn't answer. That night, guilt ate at her. What if Marcus needed something? What if not knowing could hurt him? She stole a hairbrush from Robert's bathroom, paid $200 cash at a lab in Bridgeport that didn't ask questions. The results came back in 2 weeks. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Elena folded that paper, put it in a Nike shoebox under her winter sweaters, and never looked at it again. Until now. Present day. Elena's apartment, Greenwich. Elena sat on her bed at 2 a.m., the shoebox open on her lap. The paper had yellowed, the edges soft from age, but the words were still clear, still damning. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Marcus, 6 from Victoria's lawyer, 3 from numbers she didn't recognize, probably reporters. Outside, a car was parked across the street. She'd noticed it yesterday, too. Someone was watching her. Victoria knew something, was digging for something, and every instinct Elena had screamed that bringing out this paper now, after 28 years of silence, wouldn't save Marcus. It would destroy him, because proving Robert was Marcus's father meant admitting she'd hidden it through decades of financial support. Admitting she'd accepted money, education funding, opportunities, all while keeping Robert in the dark. They'd call it fraud, extortion, conspiracy. The truth that could give Marcus his birthright would also be the evidence that took everything away. Elena closed the shoebox. Her hands were shaking. Some secrets once buried become graves, and digging them up doesn't bring resurrection. It brings ghosts. Jack Delacroix had a reputation for finding things people wanted buried. In his 15 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division, he'd tracked money through shell corporations in the Cayman Islands and unraveled fraud schemes that fooled federal auditors. A small-town secret about a housekeeper and her boss? Child's play. It took him exactly 4 days to crack the first layer. I was in a meeting with Sarah Chen, the estate attorney I'd hired after realizing I needed someone in my corner. Her office in New Haven was modest compared to the Blackwood firm. No Picassos, just framed Yale law diplomas and family photos, but her eyes were sharp. "Marcus, I need you to understand something," Sarah said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Inheritance contests are brutal. If Victoria can prove undue influence, that you or your mother manipulated Robert during a vulnerable time, you'll lose everything, and she's not playing around." "I barely knew the man," I said, frustrated. "How could I have manipulated him?" "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if she can make it look true." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I'd been getting those constantly. Reporters, mostly. I let it go to voicemail. What I didn't know was that at that exact moment, Jack Delacroix was standing in the records department of Norwalk Hospital, talking to a clerk named Brandon who had student loans and a taste for quick cash. "Birth records for Marcus Chen, born December 1998, Delacroix said, sliding $200 bills across the counter. "Specifically, I need the father's information." Brandon hesitated for maybe 3 seconds. Then he typed. The record came up clean. Mother, Elena Reyes. Father, not listed. "She left it blank," Delacroix muttered, photographing the screen. Classic move. That afternoon, Victoria stormed into Yale New Haven Hospital with the fury of someone who'd just found proof of betrayal. She found Robert in his private room, sleeping, an IV drip feeding morphine into his system. His doctor tried to stop her. "Mrs. Whitmore, your father needs rest. I need answers." Victoria's voice could have cut glass. Robert opened his eyes slowly, confused by the morphine haze. Victoria. She threw the hospital record printout onto his bed. Did you have an affair with our housekeeper? The machines monitoring Robert's heart rate started beeping faster. Elena. Robert's voice was weak, confused. No. I was married to your mother. I wouldn't. Then why is Marcus's birth certificate missing a father? Why is he getting your entire fortune? Robert's hand trembled as he tried to process the question through the medication fog. Because I failed. To be responsible. To be there for him when what? Victoria leaned closer. When you two were sneaking around behind Mom's back. No. Robert's breathing grew labored. Not like that. Never like that. I just felt responsible. Felt like I needed to make things right. To Victoria, that sounded like an admission. She grabbed her phone and called Theodore Blackwood before she even left the hospital parking garage. Meanwhile, I was doing my own digging. I'd driven to my mom's apartment in Greenwich, the small one-bedroom she'd rented for the past decade, even though Robert apparently owned properties worth millions. She wasn't home, so I used the key she'd given me years ago. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for answers. In the back of her closet, behind winter coats that smelled like lavender, I found a cardboard box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, spanning years. The return address, Whitmore Properties. I opened the first one, dated March 2000. E. Transferred the funds for Marcus's preschool tuition. Hope he's adjusting well. I find myself thinking about him often, though I'm not sure why. Perhaps because he reminds me of myself at that age. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. R. Another from 2008. E. Marcus's middle school graduation photo was beautiful. You should be proud. I find it strange how much I care about a child who isn't mine. Is that normal? R. And one from 2015. E. I've arranged for Yale's full financial package. Marcus has exceptional talent. He deserves every opportunity. I cannot explain this connection I feel, but I'm grateful you allow me to be part of his life, even from a distance. R. My hands were shaking. These weren't the letters of an employer being generous. These were the letters of someone who cared deeply but couldn't understand why. That evening, Jack Delacroix approached my mom outside the grocery store in Greenwich. She was carrying 2 bags, walking toward her car, when he stepped into her path. Ms. Reyes, I'm Jack Delacroix. I'd like to ask you some questions about Robert Whitmore. My mom froze. I have nothing to say. Did you have a relationship with Mr. Whitmore in 1997? I worked for him, that's all. But Delacroix saw the panic in her eyes, the way her hands tightened on the grocery bags. Body language didn't lie. I've traced a cash payment you made to a medical laboratory in Bridgeport, July 2003. DNA testing facility. Want to explain that? My mom's face went pale. I thought so, Delacroix said, already texting Theodore Blackwood. They were getting close. Too close. And none of them realized that what they were about to uncover wasn't just a secret affair. It was something that would rewrite the entire Whitmore family tree. Robert called me himself. His voice on the phone was barely a whisper, crackling through what sounded like hospital interference. Marcus, I need to see you. Please. Before, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I drove from Hartford to New Haven at 7 in the morning, the November sky still dark and threatening snow. My mom had texted me the night before, just 3 words. Please go, mijo. The Yale New Haven Hospital Oncology Wing had that particular heaviness that hospitals get when hope starts leaking out. Room 412. I stood outside the door for a full minute, my hand on the handle, wondering what you say to a dying man who just gave you his entire fortune. When I finally walked in, Robert was sitting up slightly, oxygen tubes in his nose, looking like a shadow of the man I remembered. But his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that apparently I'd inherited, sharpened when he saw me. Marcus, he tried to smile. Thank you for coming. I set down the flowers I'd bought at the hospital gift shop, suddenly feeling like a kid who'd brought the wrong homework. Mr. Whitmore, I don't understand why you did this. Sit. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. Please. I sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, I could hear the hospital sounds. Monitors beeping, nurses talking, someone's family crying in a distant room. When you were born, Robert finally said. I felt something I couldn't explain, like I was supposed to protect you, like you were my responsibility in a way that went beyond employing your mother. My throat tightened. I paid for your schools because it felt right. I went to your graduations, stayed in the back where you wouldn't see me, because I needed to be there. I set up trust funds because the thought of you struggling— He stopped, struggling for breath. It kept me up at night. But why? I leaned forward. I was just the housekeeper's kid. Why would you care that much? Robert's hand trembled as he reached out. I took it, feeling how fragile he'd become. You have the Whitmore eyes, he said softly. Did you know that? My father had them. I have them. And you have them too. Something cold ran down my spine. When I look at you, Marcus, I see family. I don't understand it, but I've felt it since the day you were born. Maybe that's enough. Outside the room, hidden just beyond the doorframe, my mom stood with tears streaming silently down her face. She'd driven down separately, unable to stay away, unable to watch this happen. She listened to Robert groping toward a truth he couldn't quite name. Listened to him describe the inexplicable pull he'd felt toward his own son for 28 years without understanding why. Blood, recognizing blood in a language older than words. Her hand pressed against her mouth to keep from making a sound. Down the hall, Victoria Whitmore watched through a window, her face twisted with something between rage and pain. She'd come to confront her father again, but seeing Marcus sitting there, holding Robert's hand, receiving the love and attention she'd craved her entire life, she pulled out her phone and texted Theodore Blackwood. Speed up the process. File the contest tomorrow. Back in the room, Robert squeezed my hand. Whatever Victoria does, whatever lawyers say, I need you to know. This was my choice. You deserve this. You've always deserved this. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll use it well. Be the man I always knew you were. My phone buzzed. Sarah Chen calling. I ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. You should take that, Robert said, seeing my face. I stepped into the hallway, leaving Robert's room. Sarah's voice was tense. Marcus, Victoria's filing the contest tomorrow. They're alleging undue influence. They found evidence that your mother took money to a DNA lab in 2003. They're claiming she's been running a long-term extortion scheme. The floor seemed to tilt. What? That's insane. I need you to ask your mother directly. Was there any kind of romantic relationship between her and Robert Whitmore? Because if there was, and you're his biological son, we need to know now. It changes everything legally. I found my mom in the hallway. She looked guilty, terrified, like she'd been caught. Mom. My voice came out harder than I intended. Did you have an affair with Mr. Whitmore? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Marcus, it's not. It wasn't. Yes or no? Did something happen between you two? Her eyes filled with tears. Not the way you're thinking. What does that mean? It means it was complicated. It was one night. It was a mistake. It was— She covered her face with her hands. It was the reason for everything. Before I could process that, alarms started shrieking from Robert's room. Nurses ran past us. A doctor shouted for a crash cart. I rushed back to the doorway and saw Robert convulsing. Monitors going haywire, medical staff surrounding his bed. He's coding. Get the family out. A nurse pushed me back into the hallway. Through the chaos, I heard someone say, maybe hours now, maybe less. My mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. He can't die without knowing. Marcus, he can't. Without knowing what? But she just shook her head, sobbing. And I realized, whatever secret she'd been keeping for 28 years, time had just run out. The doctors stabilized Robert after 20 terrifying minutes. He's resting now, the nurse said, but his time is very limited. Days, maybe hours. My mom drove me back to her apartment in Greenwich. Neither of us spoke during the ride. The silence was suffocating, loaded with 28 years of things left unsaid. Inside her small one-bedroom, she went straight to her closet. I heard rustling, boxes moving. When she came back, she was holding an old Nike shoebox, the kind from the late 90s, logo faded, edges soft. Siéntate, mijo, she said quietly. I sat on her worn couch, the one she'd bought secondhand from a garage sale in Stamford years ago. Even with potential millions coming my way, My mom still lived like money could disappear at any moment. Now I understood why. She opened the shoebox with trembling hands and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. She handed it to me without a word. It was a laboratory report from Bridgeport Medical Testing Services. Date, July 15th, 2003. My eyes scanned down to the results section. Alleged father, Robert James Whitmore. Child, Marcus Chen. Probability of paternity, 99. 9%. The paper slipped from my hands. He's my father? My voice didn't sound like mine. Robert Whitmore is my actual father? My mom nodded, tears streaming. That night in December 1997, at the holiday party, he was drunk, devastated about Catherine's pregnancy. We talked on the terrace for hours. He was so human that night, so vulnerable. And when we went inside to escape the cold, she couldn't finish, didn't need to. You lied to me my entire life. I stood up, pacing. Every time I asked about my dad, you said he left, that he was nobody. But he was there. He was funding my schools, going to my graduations. I was protecting you. Her voice broke. Robert was married. Powerful. If I'd told him, if anyone had found out, I would have been deported. You would have been the scandal that destroyed his family. Catherine was about to have Victoria. I couldn't. So you took his money instead? For 28 years? It wasn't like that. He offered. He felt connected to you even without knowing why. I watched him struggle with it, this inexplicable love for a child he thought was his housekeeper's son. Blood knew, Marcus, even when minds didn't. I picked up the DNA test again, hands shaking. When did you do this? You were 6, had pneumonia. The doctors needed family medical history. I was terrified not knowing could hurt you. So I confirmed it. Then I hid it. Because knowing the truth would have destroyed everything. My phone rang. Sarah Chen. I answered on speaker. Marcus, we have a serious problem. Victoria's legal team found records of your mother visiting that DNA lab. They're going to claim this is a 28-year extortion scheme. That Elena used the secret of your paternity to manipulate Robert into payments. My mom gasped. Sarah continued. If you reveal the DNA test now and prove you're Robert's biological son, yes, you have a stronger legal claim to the inheritance. But Victoria will prosecute Elena for fraud, possibly extortion. The fact that she hid paternity while accepting money. But if we don't reveal it, I asked, then Victoria wins the contest. Without proof of biological relation, the undue influence argument is strong. You'll lose everything. I looked at my mom. She was shaking her head. Don't use it. Por favor, mijo. I don't care what happens to me, but if they prosecute you for conspiracy, this is insane, I said. Finding out I have a father for the first time in my life is the thing that could destroy us? That's exactly what Victoria's banking on, Sarah said. She doesn't know about the DNA test yet, but Delacroix is close, very close. After Sarah hung up, I sat back down, looked at my mom, really looked at her, at the gray streaks in her hair she never had time to dye, at the calluses on her hands from 3 decades of cleaning other people's houses, at the apartment she'd lived in for years, small and modest, even though the man she'd shared one night with was worth hundreds of millions. Why didn't you ask him for more? I asked quietly. You could have blackmailed him, threatened exposure, gotten millions. She looked at me like I'd suggested murder. Because I loved you more than I hated my circumstances, and because Robert was a good man who made one mistake. I wouldn't destroy him for that. Even if it meant we struggled. We didn't struggle. We survived. We built a life. And you became someone I'm proud of. Not because of Whitmore money, but because of who you are. My phone buzzed. The hospital. Robert's doctor. Mr. Chen, you should come. Mr. Whitmore is asking for you. He's very weak. If there's anything you need to say to him, it should be now. I looked at my mom. I'm going to tell him. Marcus, he's dying without knowing he has a son. A real son. I won't let him die thinking I'm just some charity case he felt guilty about. My mom closed her eyes. Then I'm coming with you. If we're going to destroy everything, we do it together. We drove back to Yale, New Haven in silence, carrying a 28-year-old secret in a faded Nike shoebox. Some truths set you free. Others burn everything down. We were about to find out which kind we had. It was 2:47 a.m. when we arrived at Robert's room. The hospital hallways were nearly empty, just the whisper of nurses' shoes and the steady beep of life support machines keeping people tethered to this world. The nurse outside room 412 looked at us with that expression healthcare workers get when they know the end is close. "He's been asking for both of you," she said, glancing between me and my mom. "He's very weak, but lucid. Don't tire him." My mom clutched the shoebox against her chest like a shield, or maybe a confession. Robert looked even smaller than he had that morning, like he was already becoming transparent. But when he saw us, his eyes, those Whitmore eyes we shared, brightened slightly. "Elena, Marcus." His voice was barely a whisper. "Together. Good." The nurse left, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, it was just the three of us and a secret that had existed longer than I'd been alive. My mom approached the bed first. She was crying already, silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "Robert, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 28 years ago." He tried to lift his hand. She took it. "That night," she began, her accent thick with emotion. "December 1997. The holiday party. You and I, we talked on the terrace, and then—" "I remember," Robert interrupted softly. "Pieces of it. I was drunk. Sad. You were kind. We went to the guest house." He stopped, breathing hard from the effort. "I've thought about that night for years. Never knew if it was real or a dream my guilty conscience created. It was real." My mom's voice cracked. "And 9 months later, I had Marcus." The monitor's beeping changed rhythm. Robert's eyes widened, searching her face. "Marcus is—" She opened the shoebox with shaking hands, pulled out the yellowed DNA test and held it where he could see. "Marcus is your son. Your biological son. I tested it in 2003 to be sure, but I knew from the moment he was born. He had your eyes. Your father's eyes." Robert's breathing became ragged. Tears started rolling down his weathered face. "My son? Marcus is my son." I stepped closer to the bed, my own throat so tight I could barely breathe. "I just found out today. I had no idea. Neither of us were trying to—" 28 years, Robert whispered, staring at me with an expression of profound loss. "I lost 28 years of knowing you were mine." "You didn't lose them," my mom said urgently. "You were there. Every graduation, every milestone. You paid for his schools, supported him, loved him. Your heart knew even when your mind didn't. Blood knows, Robert. It always knows. Why didn't you tell me?" He wasn't angry, just broken. "Why, Elena?" "Because you were married. Catherine was pregnant with Victoria. If I'd told you, it would have destroyed your family, your reputation. I would have been deported, called a homewrecker, worse. And Marcus—" She looked at me. "Marcus would have been the dirty secret everyone whispered about. I couldn't do that to him." Robert reached toward me with a trembling hand. I took it, feeling the weakness in his grip. "Son," he said, and the word hit me like a physical force. "My son. I'm so sorry I didn't have the courage to see it, to know it." "You did know it," I said, my voice breaking. "Mom's right. Every time you showed up, every scholarship, every time you asked about me, you were being my dad. You just didn't call it that." He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. "The will. That's why I left everything to you. Deep down, some part of me knew. Felt it. You're my legacy. My blood. Victoria's going to destroy us over this," my mom said quietly. "Her lawyers found out about the DNA lab. They'll say I extorted you, that we conspired." "No." Robert's voice gained sudden strength. "Call Henry Morrison. Now. Get him here." "Robert, it's 3 a.m. "Now." He started coughing, struggling. Before there's no time." I called Henry Morrison, Robert's primary attorney. He answered on the third ring, groggy but professional. When I explained the situation, he said he'd be there in 20 minutes. He made it in 15. Henry Morrison walked into that hospital room in sweatpants and a Yale hoodie, carrying his briefcase like it was the middle of a business day. Robert gestured him closer. "Addendum to the will," Robert rasped. "Witness it. Record it." Henry pulled out a portable recorder and legal pad. "Go ahead, Robert. I, Robert James Whitmore, being of sound mind, Confirm that I have tonight learned that Marcus Chen is my biological son. This knowledge changes nothing about my will. Everything goes to him because he is my heir by blood and by character. Any claims of manipulation or fraud are false. Elena Reyes protected my family and raised my son alone. She deserves gratitude, not prosecution. He looked directly at the recorder. Victoria, if you're hearing this, I loved you as a daughter, but Marcus is my son. Accept it. Move forward. Don't destroy yourself with hatred. Henry documented everything. Had Robert sign with a shaking hand, witnessed by him and a nurse he pulled in. 30 minutes later, Robert Whitmore closed his eyes for the last time, holding his son's hand. "Proud of you," he whispered. Then he was gone. Victoria filed the estate contest 48 hours after Robert's funeral. Theodore Blackwood scheduled the hearing for the following Monday at Stamford Superior Court, confident they had an airtight case. They didn't know about the deathbed recording. Henry Morrison had kept it sealed, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a cold November morning in Judge Patricia Chen's courtroom. No relation to me, but Victoria's lawyer still tried to get her recused for appearance of bias. The judge shut that down in about 30 seconds. "Mrs. Whitmore is contesting the will on grounds of undue influence," Theodore began, standing before the judge in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. "We have evidence that Elena Reyes engaged in a decades-long scheme to manipulate my client's father, culminating in the fraudulent transfer of a $250 million estate." He presented his evidence: the DNA lab payment from 2003, testimony from neighbors about Robert's unusual interest in me, records of financial transfers, the letters Robert had written about feeling inexplicably connected to me. This woman, Theodore gestured toward my mom sitting beside me at the defendant's table, hid the truth of Marcus Chen's paternity for 28 years while accepting money, educational funding, and gifts. That is textbook extortion. Victoria sat in the front row, her face a mask of vindicated rage. She thought she'd won. Then Henry Morrison stood up. "Your Honor, I have new evidence that will resolve this matter completely." He approached the bench with a file folder. "This is a sworn statement and video recording made by Robert Whitmore 6 days before his passing, witnessed by myself and a registered nurse, documenting his full awareness and approval of all circumstances surrounding his will." Theodore's confident expression cracked. "Objection. This wasn't disclosed in discovery because it was created after the contest was filed," Henry said smoothly. "Robert Whitmore learned the full truth about Marcus's parentage and made this recording specifically to prevent this exact legal action." Judge Chen reviewed the documents. "I'll allow it. Play the recording." The courtroom went silent as Robert's voice filled the space. Even on video, clearly weak and dying, his words were crystal clear. "I, Robert James Whitmore, being of sound mind, confirm that Marcus Chen is my biological son. I have known this for 10 years. The courtroom erupted. Victoria shot to her feet. "That's impossible. He never—" "Order." Judge Chen's gavel cracked. Robert's recorded voice continued. "In 2015, I hired a private investigator after seeing childhood photos of Marcus. I recognized my own features. I had DNA testing done secretly, a hair sample collected during a Christmas dinner, and confirmed Marcus was mine." My jaw dropped. He'd known. For 10 years? I did not confront Elena because I understood why she'd hidden the truth. I was married, powerful, and she was vulnerable. She protected everyone: my wife, my daughter Victoria, Marcus, and even me. For that, I'm grateful. The recording showed Robert looking directly into the camera, his eyes fierce despite his weakness. The will, leaving everything to Marcus, was not manipulation. It was intentional. I spent 10 years creating trusts, funding his education, preparing him to handle this responsibility. When I received my terminal diagnosis, I finalized my plan. Theodore Blackwood stood frozen, his entire case collapsing in real time. But Robert wasn't finished. I knew Victoria would contest. I knew she would accuse Elena of fraud. So I made the will provocative on purpose, forcing the truth to surface. This recording is my final word. Marcus is my heir by blood and by character. Elena deserves protection, not prosecution. And Victoria. He paused, his expression softening. Victoria, I need you to know something. In 2018, I discovered through medical testing that you are not my biological daughter. Your mother had an affair before you were born. Victoria made a sound like she'd been punched. But I loved you anyway. I raised you as mine because family is choice, not just blood. Marcus understands this. He's offering to split the inheritance with you even though legally he doesn't have to. That's the character I hope to build in both my children. One of you inherited my DNA, the other inherited my name, but only one of you chose compassion over greed. The recording ended. The courtroom was silent except for Victoria's ragged breathing. Her face had gone from red to white to gray. Theodore Blackwood was already packing his briefcase, knowing when a case was beyond saving. Henry Morrison placed another document before the judge. Robert also left this sealed letter to be opened only if Victoria pursued legal action. It contains proof of her biological parentage and a separate trust fund of $50 million. Her inheritance if she accepts Marcus's claim peacefully. Judge Chen read the letter, then looked at Victoria. Mrs. Whitmore, you have a choice. Accept your father's wishes and the trust he left you, or continue this contest knowing your father anticipated and rejected every argument you've made. Victoria stood there, her entire world rewritten in 30 minutes. Theodore whispered something to her. She shook her head violently, then walked out of the courtroom without a word. The judge ruled in my favor. The contest was dismissed. Outside the courthouse, my mom collapsed into my arms, sobbing. He knew. All those years, he knew, and he protected us. Robert Whitmore had spent his last decade playing chess with his own death, protecting his son from beyond the grave. Some fathers teach you to ride a bike. Mine taught me that love is strategy, truth is timing, and family is what you build, not just what you're born into. Robert Whitmore was laid to rest on a gray December morning in Greenwich Cemetery, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. Half the town showed up. Business partners, employees, society people who probably didn't know him but knew his money. I stood at the graveside between my mom and Henry Morrison, watching as they lowered the casket. Victoria stood on the opposite side, alone. She'd fired Theodore Blackwood the day after the hearing and hadn't spoken to anyone since. The priest said words about eternal rest and God's grace. I barely heard them. I kept thinking about the letters I'd found, the ones where Robert wrote about feeling connected to a child who isn't mine. Except I was. I always was. When the service ended and people started to disperse, I did something that surprised even me. I walked around the grave to where Victoria stood. She stiffened when she saw me coming, her eyes red but dry. No tears left, maybe. I don't want your pity, she said before I could speak. I'm not offering pity. I'm offering half. She blinked. What? Half the inheritance. $125 million. The will gives me everything, but that doesn't make it right. You were his daughter for 46 years. You lost that and found out he wasn't your biological father in the same week. I can't imagine that pain. Her expression cracked. Why would you do that? Legally, you don't have to. Because that's what he would have wanted. Not the Robert who wrote the will to test us, but the Robert who loved you enough to raise you as his own, even knowing the truth. That Robert would want his children to be family, not enemies. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I tried to destroy you. I hired investigators. I accused your mother of... I know, and you were wrong. But grief makes people do terrible things. Trust me, I understand. I gestured to the grave. He forgave you before you even needed it. I can do the same. She cried then, really cried. Not the angry tears of the courtroom, but the broken sobs of someone who'd lost everything familiar and didn't know how to rebuild. I'll accept your offer, she said finally. But I have conditions. I want to sell Whitmore Properties. I can't work there anymore. Too many memories. Agreed. And I want to create a foundation with part of the money, the Whitmore Foundation, for children of single parents. Help families like mine and my mom's. Victoria almost smiled. He would have liked that. Over the next 3 months, lawyers drew up new agreements. Victoria got half the estate plus the $50 million Robert had set aside for her. I got the other half and the satisfaction of knowing I'd done the right thing. We sold Whitmore Properties for $180 million. The buyers were a development firm from Boston who promised to keep the staff employed. My mom, against all her protests, received $10 million in the deed to a small house in Greenwich. Not the mansion, just a comfortable 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where she could finally rest. "Mijo, this is too much," she said when I showed her the house. "You raised a son alone, sacrificed everything to protect people who never knew they needed protecting, and gave a dying man the gift of knowing his child. You earned every cent." She cried, but they were good tears this time. The media coverage was intense for a few weeks. Billionaire's secret son shares fortune with half-sister made headlines from Hartford to New York. But eventually, other scandals took over, and we were allowed to fade back into normal life. Well, as normal as life gets when you're suddenly worth over $100 million. I left the architecture firm, couldn't really focus on strip mall designs anymore, and threw myself into building the foundation. We partnered with schools across Connecticut, offering scholarships, legal aid, and financial counseling to single-parent households. The first recipient was a woman from Bridgeport, a housekeeper like my mom, whose daughter wanted to be a doctor. When I handed her the scholarship check, I saw my mom's face 28 years ago, making impossible choices to give her child a chance. "Pay it forward," I told her. "That's all we ask." 6 months after Robert's death, Victoria called me. We'd been texting occasionally, mostly about foundation business, but hearing her voice was different. "Marcus, I was wondering, would you want to have lunch? As, siblings?" I smiled. "Yeah, Victoria, I'd like that." We met at a diner in Stamford, neutral territory. It was awkward at first. What do you say to the sister who tried to destroy you and then became family anyway? But we figured it out. Talked about Robert, about our childhoods, about the weird parallel lives we'd lived in the same town without really knowing each other. "He was a complicated man," Victoria said, stirring her coffee, "but he loved us. Both of us. Just differently." "Yeah," she agreed. "He did." We left that diner as something we'd never been before. Actual family. Not because of blood, not because of wills or money or legal documents, because we chose it. And that, I realized, was the real inheritance Robert left us. The Robert and Elena Whitmore Center opened on a crisp November morning, exactly 1 year after Robert passed away. The building stood on the site of what used to be one of his smaller properties in Greenwich, a $15 million facility designed to support single parents and their children with education, legal services, and community resources. I stood at the ribbon with my mom beside me, looking out at the crowd of families, supporters, and press. Victoria was there too, standing slightly apart, but present. That meant something. "This center exists because 2 people made impossible choices," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "My mother, Elena Reyes, chose truth over comfort. My father, Robert Whitmore, chose love over convention. And together, without ever really being together, they taught me that family isn't about DNA. It's about showing up." My mom squeezed my hand. She'd retired from housekeeping the month after the settlement, though she still couldn't break the habit of cleaning her own house obsessively. Now she ran the center's operations, bringing the same fierce dedication to helping others that she'd brought to raising me. "We're starting with 50 families," I continued. 50 single parents who won't have to choose between honesty and survival, who'll have support, resources, and a community that understands their struggle. As I cut the ribbon, cameras flashed. The headlines the next day would read, "Whitmore Heir opens foundation in parents' honor," and "From housekeeper's son to philanthropist, Marcus Chen's journey." But the moment I'd remember wasn't the press coverage or the ceremony. It was later, during the open house, when a young mother approached me. She was maybe 25, her daughter clinging to her leg, both of them wearing clothes that had been washed too many times. "Mr. Chen?" Her voice shook. "I'm Rebecca Martinez. I received the first scholarship. My daughter Sophia. She's going to private school next year because of you." I knelt down to Sophia's level. "You know what? My mom worked really hard to give me opportunities too. Sounds like you have a pretty great mom." Sophia nodded seriously. She cleans houses, like your mommy did. The best moms often do, I said, glancing at my own mom across the room. She was showing another family the resource center, her face animated and happy in a way I'd never seen before. After the crowd thinned, Victoria approached. We'd had lunch twice more since that first meeting, slowly building something that resembled a sibling relationship. "It's a good thing you're doing here," she said, looking around the center. "Dad would have been proud." "Yeah, I think he would have." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "I've been holding on to this. Henry gave it to me last month. It's from Dad, written about 5 years ago. He wanted you to have it when the time was right." My hands trembled as I opened it. Robert's handwriting, strong and clear before illness, weakened him. "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if things went according to plan, you now know that you're my son. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to tell you myself while I was alive. I'm sorry for the years we lost, for the conversations we never had, for the simple act of looking you in the eye and saying, 'I'm your father, and I'm proud of you.' I discovered the truth in 2015. I could have confronted Elena then, could have demanded explanations and restructured our lives around this revelation. But I watched how she'd raised you, with strength, dignity, and love, and I realized she'd been the parent you needed. I'd been something else, the safety net, the mysterious benefactor, the man who showed up without explanation. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all I deserved to be. But I want you to know, every scholarship, every trust fund, every time I watched you graduate from the back of an auditorium, it wasn't guilt, it was love. The kind of love that doesn't ask for recognition or credit, the kind that just shows up. Use the money wisely, not to prove your worth, but to multiply goodness in the world. And forgive Elena. She did what love does, protected the people she cared about, even at great cost to herself. P.S. Take care of your sister. She'll need you, even if she doesn't know it yet. Love, Dad." I read the letter twice, tears blurring the words. Then I handed it to my mom, who cried as she read it. Finally, Victoria read it, her expression softening. "He planned everything," Victoria said quietly. "Even us becoming family." "Yeah," I agreed. "He did." That evening I visited Robert's grave alone, placed the letter on the headstone temporarily, weighing it down with a stone. "Mission accomplished, Dad," I said to the cold marble. "Victoria and I are family now. Mom's happy. The foundation is running. You set up the dominoes perfectly and we knocked them down just like you knew we would." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the smell of late autumn. "I wish I'd known sooner. Wish I could have called you Dad while you were here to hear it. But you taught me something more important than biology, that being a father is about choices, not chromosomes. You chose me before you even knew why. That's the legacy I'm going to carry forward." I stood there as the sun set, surrounded by graves and memories and the weight of a fortune I'd never asked for but would use well. Robert Whitmore left me $250 million. But the real inheritance wasn't in the bank accounts or the properties or the trust funds. It was in the lesson written into every choice he'd made, that love is action, family is decision, and the truest legacies are built not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away.